Hello and welcome. I am Ellie Richardson and you are watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. White House confirms India's $500 billion US investment plan. US Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt makes a statement. The US military shot down an Iranian drone after it aggressively approached the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea. Washington says talks with Iran remain scheduled this week despite the incident. Ukraine's foreign ministry says that the latest round of Russia-Ukraine-US trilateral talks in Abu Dhabi will primarily focus on military and military political issues. Former UK Cabinet Minister Peter Mandelson has quit the House of Lords after leaked emails tied to him to Jeffrey Epstein, while British police have opened a criminal probe into alleged misconduct in public office. Former US President Bill Clinton and his wife Hillary Clinton agreed to testify in the congressional investigation into Jeffrey Epstein, allowing them to avoid being found in contempt of Congress. At least 35 people have been killed after gunmen raided Waro, a remote village in Kwara State, authorities say. Residents describe it as the deadliest attack in the area this year. Amid restrictions at Rafah, at least 10 Palestinians, including children, killed in an Israeli attack across Gaza since early morning, as per reports. US President Donald Trump signed a roughly $1.2 trillion funding bill, ending a short federal shutdown after a 217 to 214 House vote. Now for your top story this hour. The Kremlin says that it saw nothing new in India's announcement that it would diversify its oil supplies, as New Delhi has always bought oil from different countries, including Russia. Meanwhile, Russia's foreign ministry also says that they have no reason to believe that India have reconsidered their approach. This comes as the Indian Prime Minister of Commerce and Industry previously said that India would diversify its energy sources as a strategy amid changing global circumstances to ensure energy security for its citizens. Goyal's statement followed the announcement, but US President Donald Trump on Monday of a US-India trade deal. Trump spoke about New Delhi halting its Russian oil purchases, something that India has not publicly confirmed since. We are now being joined by Surinder Singh Lally, who's an international affairs expert, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. Why is India looking to diversify its oil supplies now, and what does this mean for its energy security?
Thank you, Ellie. It's a pleasure and honor for me to be here. And your question is, why is India willing to diversify? I wish to sort of step back and say that whatever we've heard about the Russian oil, the American president saying that we won't be buying Russian oil, it's only said by the American president. If you realize, nobody from the Indian dispensation has confirmed it yet. You know, because the way the mercurialist Donald Trump is, he tends to shoot and scoot. So a lot of what is being said as if now, till the joint declaration doesn't come, I'm going to hold my horses and wait for it to pan out for itself. Number one. Number two is that we're not against, as India is a country, against, not buying energy from other places, despite Russia. In fact, to be honest, we did the world a favor, because had we not been buying the Russian oil, there would have been inflation all across the world. It's only when Trump 2.0 turns around and weaponizes that as against us And that too, I think it was more to do with pushing us to buy more oil from America than Russia, because I don't think he's been able to stop this war either. And he's been punishing us from not buying for buying oil from Russia, but he's done nothing to China and nothing to Europe, who's been buying other things, and including America, which is buying uranium itself. So the irony of the whole thing is that Donald Trump, whatever he says, one has to sleep over it, one has to consume it, and then get back to it once has consumed the information and slept over it.
Mm. And why did the Kremlin say there is nothing new in India's plan? Is Russia that confident that India will continue buying Russian oil, even though Trump has publicly said that they will stop?
You see, once again, what Trump publicly says, he had gone to acquire Greenland. He wanted to buy Greenland. What happened? He says a lot of things, the way he penalized China because he didn't have any choke points. And when China stopped the rare earth, then Trump had to withdraw. So Donald Trump, 2 steps forward and 3 steps back is the criteria. But there is more to our relationship with Russia too, from the Cold War era. So I'm not too sure it's not just about oil. A lot of our defense equipment is Russian, and we need spare parts, And we don't know. I mean, just Donald Trump can't change his mood one day and, tell us to totally do away with Russia. And then how unreliable he's been. Look at the way he's been treating his allies. I mean, he's actually thrown the Bretton Woods Agreement totally out the window. He's left each ally to fend for themselves. So as I said, the jury is out on this one, and I don't think we are going to, this is my opinion, and this is something which I'm saying, beyond my pay grade. I don't think we are going to do away with Russia, even with the oils, because let's understand one thing, Ali. Donald Trump is not America, and you never know the way he has his back against the wall, the tariffs are in court, the Epstein files, he's called the National Guard in the cities, inflation. So he has, everything that he's done is backfired, especially in terms of tariffs, with the inflation it has costed. So Donald Trump has his back against the wall, and I think what the last straw was in order to finalize this was our agreement with the European Union. I mean, 27 countries, the second largest economy, 45 crore people. So he's understood that India is not going to simply bow down like some of the other countries did. And succumb like little school kids getting reprimanded by the headmaster, the way he's practically humiliated every head of the state in the Oval Office. So India didn't back down, and that kind of put him in the back spot. Even the British Prime Minister travels to China, and what Mark Carney spoke at Davos, and the way French president has been out in the open. So I think Donald Trump is getting his withdrawal symptoms. He's understanding that what he assumed and presumed, it ain't working.
Thank you so much, Surinder Singh Lally, for joining us here today on NewsX World. At least 6 people have been killed and 1 person injured in Russian airstrikes on the Ukraine-controlled Donetsk region, local officials report. The attacks targeted residential areas, causing significant damage. Ukrainian authorities condemned the assault, highlighting the impact on civilian populations. The escalation follows a series of ongoing airstrikes in the region. The attacks have drawn attention to the continued risks faced by civilians in Donetsk, and as tensions between Russia and Ukraine remain high. Moscow has expressed appreciation for the efforts of American negotiators in facilitating the ongoing discussions over the Ukraine conflict. Russian presidential spokesperson Dmitry Peskov acknowledged the role of the US in the trilateral talks and reaffirmed Russia's commitment to a peaceful settlement. Peskov emphasized that Russia's position is well understood, but by both Kyiv and US mediators, who are making valuable contributions to the dialogue. The first round of consultations took place in Abu Dhabi in January, with key figures from Russia, Ukraine and the US taking part. The second round of trilateral talks is scheduled for February the 4th to the 5th, and various formats for the discussions are already underway. We are now being joined by Ben Aris, who is a former Moscow bureau chief in the Daily Telegraph, joining us here from Berlin. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. Why might the Kremlin publicly express gratitude towards the United States for peace efforts, even as we've just heard before, fighting continues on the ground?
It's a game. The Kremlin needs to keep Donald Trump in the negotiations, because he's the only one that can facilitate a deal, in so much as Trump is all the way down the line basically pushed and backed the Russian position. Trump has made it crystal clear that he wants to do business with Russia. All of his peace deals, his negotiations, have included some sort of minerals deal or access to oil. We saw that in Venezuela. In Ukraine, the whole US coming in to support the end of the war effort started with Trump insisting on a minerals deal. And Russia is, after China, it's by far the biggest deposits of everything that America needs, from rare earth to critical minerals to uranium, to forget the oil and gas, the massive oil and gas deposits it has. And so Trump has an ego. Our previous colleague just said, he's completely unpredictable. He plays to his whims, and he's focused on these things. And he doesn't want to alienate Trump. And so Putin has, down the line, been very polite, very grateful. He's been saying thank you constantly, something that Trump criticized Zelensky for not doing. And that the negotiations that are going on at the moment, if you think of it in historical terms, this is Russia's big chance to get sanctions lifted. That Trump will do that as part of the deal. And if we wait to the next president, it's sort of going to go back to normal. And those sanctions, once they go on, the Jackson Vanik sanctions, for example, were on for 2 generations. And so Putin wants to do a deal. He wants a ceasefire, but he's sticking his heels in. He's insisting on taking control of all of Donbass and sovereign control of it, not just military control. And he also wants a sanctions deal piled into this as well. And Trump can deliver on all of that, because Trump is not really negotiating. He's just pushing the Russian line. The security guarantees that Zelensky is so desperate for, reports are saying that the White House have linked that with Zelensky conceding the Donbass, giving up the Donbass completely before they get the American security deal. And that's what's being talked about today, tomorrow, in the Dubai meetings between the Russian and Ukrainian side.
And can Russia's acknowledgements of the US, as you said, like saying thank you and coming out and publicly being thankful for what's going on and the talks that the US are holding for these two countries to come together, is this seen as genuine support, or for a diplomatic resolution, or is it more of a political message aimed at the Western audiences, or is this purely to benefit Russia as a whole?
Putin's got an audience of one. Donald Trump. He's the only player in this game that Putin cares about, and he's been playing everything towards specifically Trump personally. The two of them met in Alaska last August. They thrashed out a wireframe deal. Interestingly, the lead negotiator on the Russian side is not Sergei Lavrov, who's legendary foreign minister. It's a guy called Kirill Dmitriev, who's the head of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. And he's been talking almost exclusively with Witkoff, who is also not a diplomat, but also a businessman. And in Alaska, it became clear later that in addition to peace, that the two of them, Putin and Trump, talked about all sorts of deals, oil and gas deals, that it was suggested, Trump said that the Russians could come in and develop the rare earth material deposits in Alaska on American territory as a joint venture. And so there's no real negotiation going on here. It's just like Putin's trying to get this across the line by getting Zelensky to concede give up the Donbass, effectively, surrender to Russia's demands. And Trump is his agent pushing this line. And the problem is that Zelensky's refusing to do it. And Zelensky's being backed by the Europeans, who are coming up with all these alternative plans like peacekeepers and forces going into Ukraine and 90 billion euro loan to keep Ukraine funded for another 2-year war if that's necessary. So but Zelensky's in a real corner. They're losing on the ground. The Russian forces are making advances. Russians have bombed the power system, so practically the whole of Ukraine is blacked out in the middle of the coldest winter in decades. And he can't go on much longer. So again, the talks going on at the moment are key. There's an opportunity to end this, but it does mean that Zelensky has to make some very painful concessions. And what he's trying to do is get this security guarantee out of the Americans, because if he gets that, and it includes a military component, then he can secure his borders post-war. If he doesn't have that guarantee, then all that will happen was that they'll give away the Donbass. There'll be no guarantees from the Allies, and Russia can reinvade anytime it wants, anytime there's a new argument. So the security guarantee is key, but Zelensky's leverage over Trump is very weak, and Putin's influence over Trump is very strong. So Zelensky's in a really tough spot at the moment.
Thank you. Don't go too far, Ben, as we will come back to you very shortly. The Kremlin has confirmed that low-level talks between Russia and France are underway, following comments by French President Emmanuel Macron about resuming contacts. Moscow said the discussions are taking place through diplomatic channels, even as broader relations between the two countries remain strained. The development comes amid ongoing tensions over Ukraine and European security. We are now being joined back again by Ben Aris. Thank you for joining us back here on NewsX World. What is the significance of these low-level talks between Russia and France at this stage of the Ukrainian conflict, and how do they differ from the high-level diplomatic engagement?
They're pretty significant. The war's been going on, I think in 2 weeks' time, it will have gone on for exactly 4 years. And during that time, in effect, the EU has broken off all diplomatic relations with Russia. The two sides have not talked. The last time that Macron talked to Putin was on February 8th, about 2 weeks before the war started, and there's been no contact since. And the Europeans have been frustrated because it's the Trump team that initiated the current peace talks and re-established contact. Trump talks to Putin on the phone all the time. It's been like a dozen phone calls. And the EU leaders, no one's talked to Trump, with a few exceptions like Orban from Hungary and Fico from Slovakia, but they have a special relationship with Russia to do with gas. And Macron has suddenly changed tack because since Trump's come in, and I was talking about this relationship between Trump and Putin in the negotiations, what happened was that the EU keeps saying, but this is a war in our backyard. It intimately affects European security because we're afraid that Russia's going to invade Europe, anytime within the next 5 years. And so we need to be involved in the resolution. We need to be involved in the peace deal. We need our security guaranteed as part of this process. And no one's talking to them. The special envoys, the US envoys, went to see Putin in December. The EU produced a list of its demands, and the Americans just ignored it and just went back to the original Trump offer that was drawn up in November. And here we see, I think, finally that the EU are sort of facing up to reality, and they're like, we can't be excluded anymore. We need to be involved. The Trump administration is totally ignoring everything we say and not letting us be involved. So they're now trying to inject themselves by going directly to the Kremlin. And again, as I said before, that Putin's interested in doing a deal. He's enough of a realist to understand that Europe will have to be involved in some way, because otherwise Europe is just going to interfere anyway, like putting troops into Ukraine, which is anathema to the Kremlin. And so they've started this low-level talks. Whether they produce anything is a totally different question, because the trouble with Europe's suggestions or demands is the Kremlin has rejected all of them completely out of hand. And it keeps going back to that Alaska meeting between Trump and Putin, the wireframe deal they worked out. And the Kremlin said, that's the deal that we want, and we're not prepared to compromise. We won't take any European demands on board at all. And so these talks are going to be fruitless if the Europeans, particularly Macron, who's been a very solid supporter of Ukraine, are going to be pretty fruitless if Europeans go to the Kremlin and say, but we demand this as well, and we demand that as well. The Kremlin's just going to say no.
Thank you so much, Ben Aris, for joining us here today on NewsX World. It's a pleasure speaking with you. The death toll in central Nigeria has risen to 162 after gunmen attacked Woro. Officials said it is one of the deadliest attacks in recent times. The incident took place in Kwara State in western Nigeria, where gunmen set homes and shops ablaze along areas bordering Niger State. The attack was confirmed by the police, though they have not confirmed the casualty figures. Rural attacks have surged across the northwest and north-central Nigeria in recent months, with repeated cases of armed gang raids, village invasions and widespread livestock looting, deepening insecurity in the region. That's all we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.